Hello students, this is Miss Dalton and this video is on synthetic division. If you remember in the last unit we talked about how to divide polynomials using long division. So let's review that. If I take this polynomial x to the fourth minus 7x squared plus 9x minus 10 and I divide it by x minus 2, first thing you'd want to do is you'd want to look and see if it has any missing terms. Well, if this is x to the fourth, after x to the fourth, I should have an x to the third. So right here, I'm going to have to mark my place with a 0 x to the third. So let's go ahead and write this down because I think that's the only missing term. So we're going to take x minus 2, and we're going to divide it into x to the fourth plus 0x to the third minus 7x squared plus 9x minus 10. And so to start off with, you just want to look at that first term. So x can go into x to the fourth, x to the third times. And then we're going to multiply. X to the third times x gives us x to the fourth, and x to the third times a negative 2 is negative 2x to the third. Then you want to make sure that you draw your line. And when you draw your line, you need to change the sign of that second row. So then you're going to add, this cancels, this gives you 2x to the third. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring down the minus 7x squared. Then I'm looking again. I need to look at the first term in each of these. So 2x to the third divided by an x is 2x squared. And now multiply that. 2x squared times x would give you 2x to the third. 2x squared times a negative 2 gives you negative 4x squared. And then make sure that you draw your line and change your signs. Okay, now let's add those up. So these would cancel. This would give you a negative 3x squared. And go ahead and bring down your plus 9x. Now divide. Negative 3x squared divided by x is a negative 3x. Now multiply. Negative 3x times x is negative 3x squared. And negative 3x times a negative 2 gives you a positive 6x. Draw your line, change your signs. So now, when I add those up, these cancel. This gives me 3x. And I'm going to bring down the minus 10. So 3x divided by x is 3. So I'm going to put a plus 3 here, and then 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times a negative 2 gives you negative 6. So when I draw my line and change my signs, these cancel. This gives me a remainder of negative 4. I know that that's my remainder because I don't have anything else to bring down. So you would write it as plus a negative 4 divided by x minus 2. Okay, now we're going to look at synthetic division. So I can take this same polynomial and I can use synthetic division. Now, synthetic division only works when you are dividing by a linear term, which we are. This is a linear polynomial. And so here's how it works. What you're going to do is whatever you're dividing by, x minus 2, you need to set that equal to 0 and solve it. So that would be an x value of 2. That's going to be what you're going to put on the outside. And in synthetic division, you only use the coefficients of the polynomial. So in this polynomial over here, I start with a 1 as my coefficient, so I'm going to put a 1. Now, we do need to put our missing term, so I need to put a 0 for it. Then my coefficient is negative 7. Then I have a 9. And then I have a negative 10. Okay, now look at how this is going to work. We're going to get the exact same answer if we use synthetic division. And honestly, synthetic division is a little bit easier to do. Here are the steps. What you're going to do is you're going to bring down that first number, so 1. You're going to multiply the 2 times 1, and that's going to go right here. So 2 times 1 is 2. Then you're going to add, so 0 plus 2 is 2. Then you're going to multiply. 2 times 2 is 4, and that goes here. Then you add. -7 plus 4 is -3. Then you multiply. -3 times 2 is -6. Then you add. This would be 3. 3 times 2 is 6, which would give you a -4. This very last number represents your it represents your remainder. So look at how this works. Whatever I started with, so I started with an x to the 4th. You're going to go 1 degree down. So this is going to be an x to the 3rd, and then keep going down. This would be an x squared. This would be an x, and that would be your constant. So you can look and see my answer would be x to the 3rd plus 2x squared minus 3x plus 3 with a remainder of -4 divided by what I divided by, x minus 2. Okay, look at this. This answer is the exact same answer that we got here. Which one do you think is easier? So which one would you rather use? Well, a lot of people like synthetic division. They like to use synthetic division better than long division. Here's the thing though, why would we ever use long division? Well, synthetic division can only be used when your divisor is linear. Okay, so it has to be of the format x plus or minus some number. Okay, it also has to have a leading coefficient of 1. So if I'm dividing by, let's say, 2x plus 3, the leading coefficient is not 1, and so therefore it makes it a little more difficult. You can use synthetic division, but you can't divide it by this. You would have to change it, and I'm not going to really talk about that right now. So the only time we use synthetic division in this class is where we're going to divide by a linear polynomial that has a leading coefficient of 1. All right, so you just saw how I use synthetic division, but here are the steps. You're going to set up using coefficients only in descending exponent order. You must add a 0 as a placement for any missing terms. Write the 0 of the divisor. So what I mean by that is in that previous one, we were dividing by x minus 2. So you would have to set that equal to 0, and that would give you x equals positive 2. It's always going to be the opposite sign of the number in divisor. So that 0 has to go on the left side. Then you're going to fill in the right side with all of your coefficients from the polynomial that's being divided. You will bring down your first term, so the first coefficient is going to come down, and then you will multiply, then add, and repeat. The final sum is your remainder, and you want to write your answer with 1 degree less than the dividend. Okay, so let's look at some more examples. All right, so here's my first example. I've got x to the 3rd minus 11x squared minus 5x plus 30 divided by x minus 2. And so you want to look and see if there's any missing terms. This starts with an x to the 3rd, x squared, x, and so there's no missing terms there. Now, what we're going to put on the outside is always going to be the opposite of this number. So we're going to put a positive 2 on the outside. Then you're going to draw your little box like that, and you're only going to put the coefficients. So my coefficient of x to the 3rd is 1, so that's going to be a 1. My coefficient here is -11. Then I've got -5, and then I've got 30. Now, what I tend to do is on that last number right at the very bottom, I go ahead and draw my box. this is going to be my remainder, and so that kind of reminds me that that number will be my remainder. So the very first thing you do is you drop down that first number. You will always drop down that first number. Then you multiply 2 times 1, and then you add -9. Then you multiply -9 times 2, -18. Then you add -23. And then you multiply. -23 times 2 is -46. And then you add -16. So my remainder is -16. Now, when you write your answer, you want to make sure that you start with 1 degree less than this. So this is going to be an x squared. Then it's going to be an x. The last number before the box should always be your constant. And so my answer is x squared minus 9x minus 23 plus a -16 over what I divided by x minus 2. All right, let's look at another example. We've got 2x to the third plus 5x squared minus 3x divided by x plus 3. So it starts with an x to the third, then it goes down to x squared, then it goes down to x, but I'm missing my constant, and so right here I'm going to put a 0 in its place. We're going to divide by the opposite of this, so we're going to put a -3, then we're going to draw our box. And we're going to put our coefficients. So I've got a 2, then I've got a 5, then I've got a -3, then I have 0. We're going to drop down the 2, multiply, -3 times 2 is -6, then add. 5 plus -6 is -1. -1 times -3 is 3, add 0. And then 0 times -3 is 0, so that means that my remainder right here is 0. So this is a factor, actually. And so our answer, since I started with an x to the third, we're going to go 1 down and make this x squared, then an x, and then my constant. So when I divide those, my answer is 2x squared minus 1x. I don't need to put plus 0, and so this would be the answer. All right, last example. 8x to the third plus 16x squared plus 7. Immediately I notice that I'm missing an x, and so this would be 0x. And I'm going to divide it by x minus 2. So I'm going to put the opposite of this on the outside, and then put your coefficients. 8, 16, 0, and 7. And if you want to go ahead and make your box right there to know that that's going to be your remainder. Immediately drop down your first number. So 2 times 8 is 16. 16 plus 16 is 32. 32 times 2 is 64. 64 plus 0 is 64. 64 times 2 is 128, and 128 plus 7 is 135. So, since I started with an x to the third, you're going to go 1 down. This is x squared, this is x, that's your constant and remainder. So your answer would be 8x squared plus 32x plus 64 plus my remainder of 135 divided by x minus 2. All right, so that's how you synthetically divide. Hopefully you see that it is a lot easier than long division, but again, long division does have its reasons on when we use it. If you're not dividing by a linear factor, then you would need to use long division.